comment because I wanted to actually, I remembered while Katrina was speaking that there is one example of the drift between what's in the Constitution and what's the reality. And that's very well exhibited was Article 31, which grants the freedom of assembly. It's in the Constitution. Nobody has changed that article. However, there is a harsh difference in what's in the Constitution and how the principle is being implemented in reality. There is a law that was passed under Putin that prohibits people assembling in public in quantities more than one without a special permission. And while it may seem okay that in any normal country you would apply for a permission, you know how, for example, here I've organized protests in New York, and for example, if you would want to use a loudspeaker, you apply to the city of New York to get a permit to use, you know, special equipment during your demonstration, and you know you wait and you get it, unless you're asking to close down Fifth Avenue without any good reason. Well, in Russia, that law is being used to essentially prohibit any kind of opposition gatherings. So what ends up happening is that any kind of opposition demonstrations are carried out either illegally, because people come out on the street and they are never able to get a permit, or it's essentially the ability of people to express their opinion is neutered because they can come out, but there's going only to be one person, and that's what allowed. The latest change that came, and that was, it's speculated that it's somehow connected to the new mayor of Moscow, is that the opposition movement has finally gotten the permission to hold a rally on the 31st of October, I believe. Yeah, 31st of October on the Triumphal Square in Moscow. So that was in the last 2 years the only instance where they in Moscow were granted the permission. All their other almost 12 applications were denied.
Yes.
What about the use of the internet? Is that having any impact on the ability of people to share views that might be in opposition to the central government?
Judging by what's said online, yes, it has a great impact, because the discussions that are actually happening in the comment sections of online media outlets and the blogs on Facebook, they are, you know, very intellectual, and if you would not look at the traditional media, and if I wouldn't be talking to my friends back home, and I would just read what people are saying online, I would have this opinion that everything in Russia is fine. However, there's a big difference between what people are saying in these online formats and what's actually happening on the street, because you know people have access to information. Internet has definitely enabled access to information, but what it didn't enable is it didn't give people courage, because even though they have an opinion, they're not going on the street to express it, and that's one of the biggest side effects of a totalitarian state, is that people are afraid to get beaten up and locked up and spend a couple of days in detention. So that's, the access is there. The result of the discussion online is not going forward.
I would just like to add one thing to that, which is also we're so familiar, it's so much a part of our lives to go on the internet to look for something that we hear about. You hear something in the news, you hear something in the paper, you hear a friend mention something, and you go on the internet and you Google it or you look it up. You have to know what you're looking for. You don't know what information you're going to get, but you have to know what your point of entry is. So that's a big issue. If none of this is discussed in the conventional media, and if people aren't really talking about this stuff amongst themselves, how do you know to go and look for what's happening? And it takes a lot. It's not just about courage. It's literally about framing these ideas that aren't being put in front of your face.
I'm thinking the Voice of America during World War II.
So
There's an opportunity. I had a follow-up question, and that was, if I may, has our government or any other government, say in Europe, taken any action in connection with this judicial action against your father?
Yes, on many occasions. The United States government has issued numerous statements. The United States Congress has issued many different resolutions in support of my father. The governments of France and Germany have been in general supportive, and they've been raising this issue. However, the effect, unfortunately, is not there because Russians are very resistive to outside commentary on what they perceive as being their purely internal affairs. And as soon as the issue gets pushed harder, the typical response is, we're not suggesting that you close down Guantanamo. Don't suggest to us that we, release Khodorkovsky.
So many good questions. We'll have one more question right there. Thank you.
I guess maybe this is a little bit historic, but I'm wondering whether, and perhaps some of the elder people here remember the transfer of power from Yeltsin to Putin. It seems to me that, at least when I saw that happen, at some level this was predictable. And I'm a little frustrated that the world didn't see that happen. And I'm wondering what your opinion is.
I'll give just a personal reflection, if I may, and then pass it along. And there may be some observations from the audience as well. At that time, our family was actually living in Denmark. And Dick was serving as ambassador there. And Yeltsin was very ill and, really beginning to lose his grip in many ways. And but I remember being struck by the reaction of particularly the older generation that we interacted with in Denmark. And to a person they said, with this very grave tone that reflects the comments of your grandmother, Mikhail's mother, they said, nothing good can come from having a KGB man as president of Russia, to a person. And I just remember being struck by the absolute unanimity of that viewpoint. So, from a perspective of a community that we were living with in the midst of Europe that had experienced, many, many things over the course of their lives, there was that universal reaction.
I've spoken.
I have two really quick things to say about it. One is, I was in Nepal when that transition occurred, and I was with friends who their families have historically, hereditarily been involved in the government there. And I remember sitting there with them, and they were all kind of gleeful when Putin was appointed. I just thought, why are you so happy? And they said, because this is brilliant. This is exactly what Nepal needs. Nepal needs a strong hand, and this is perfect for Russia. And I remember you know, my liberal